Well, it's hard to believe that Easter's coming up really soon, and I hope that you'll make plans to attend and to be here with us at worship at Easter, and certainly invite your friends, neighbors, enemies. They probably need it more than anybody, but we look forward to having a great Sunday. It's I think the last Sunday in March, if I remember right, but March is kind of a long month. It's got 5 weeks, 5 Sundays in it, and if you can help by bringing wrapped candy or even like little toys or something, you know, the kids ministry, they are always looking for stuff for Easter to give the kids and to have a special day for them. So if you don't mind bringing that and dropping it off next time you come to church at the welcome table, we'd appreciate it. Let's get into our Bible study in Luke chapter 9. You know, Jesus is going around teaching and doing miracles, and people love him. Most of the people love him. The crowds love him. He's healing and driving out demons and challenging the status quo, and you know, people are following him. And then there's such a great crowd of people that listen to his teaching for so long that they finally get hungry. And Jesus, you know, is teaching. The disciples are ministering. And this great crowd of people has been with them for days, and they're very hungry. And this is the feeding of the 5,000. Now, it's called the feeding of the 5,000 because in their day, they only counted men. Like it or hate it, it's the ancient world, and there's probably more like 10,000 people here if we estimated correctly. If we speculate with wives and children and families, there's probably around 10,000 or more people at this gathering. And that's a lot of people. It's a mega church. And it's time to eat, and they're in a remote place and they don't have anything to eat. So Jesus solves this by taking this little boy's lunch and multiplying it miraculously to feed the crowd. And there's lessons here, not only for the crowd, but there's lessons here for the disciples about having faith and trust when you don't feel like you have enough resources in order to meet the needs of the community around you. So there's some really practical lessons here for us. Let's dive into this, read it, and then hopefully we'll get to the end of this section where Jesus talks about the cost of discipleship, about taking up your cross and following him. It's really challenging, some of the most challenging words that Jesus ever said. So let's look at verse 12, chapter 9 of Luke. And we're just going through the book of Luke. My goal is to try to get through all of this before Easter, but I don't, you know, I'm going to have to make some big jumps to get to the resurrection, you know, on Easter Sunday. But so late in the afternoon, the 12 came to him and they said, "Send the crowd away so that they can go to the surrounding villages and countryside and find food and lodging because we are in a remote place." And Jesus replied to them, "You give them something to eat." Now, let's just pause here for a minute. I want you to see something I think is interesting is everybody's tired, everybody's exhausted, everybody's probably done with people. Some of you have a very short done with people fuse. Others of you are energized by being around people. I'm energized by being around people. If I'm feeling low and you guys come to my house, by the time you leave, I'm feeling great. It just energizes me to be around people. But there are also those others out there called introverts that are, you know, depleted by being around people. People exhaust you. And I get it, you know, when you get done with a week of vacation Bible school, or you get done with a week at summer camp, you're working, you know, junior high summer camp or whatever, or you get done with a mission trip or a building project at church or anything that you do like that, you think about those ministry opportunities. By the time you're done, you're not only tired and just physically drained, but you're tired of people. Like you're just done with people. You don't feel like you have anything else to give. You guys know what I'm talking about? Or maybe just family. Like you have family come in and visit you. Mary, be careful who you look at. I know you got a lot of family right now visiting you. But, you know, when you get this family and all these other people in your house and they're using your towels and they're spilling your coffee and you get all these other people, you love it. It's so great. It's so exciting. It's so much fun. But, you know, what do they say? Families like fish or friends are like fish. They're good for about 2 or 3 days and then they start to stink, you know, and it's time to move on. And the disciples are humans. They're just like you and I. They love people, I think, maybe not Judas, but they love people and they love God and they love ministry, but they're done. The revival has exhausted them and they are done. Everybody's coming to them. Everybody's bumping into them. Everybody's asking them questions. People want help. They want handouts. Some people just want to tell you their story. Oh my goodness. You know what I'm talking about? They just want to tell you their story and they're tired. And just look at their ministry perspective in this moment because it's terrible. Send the crowds away. You know, most church leaders focused the other direction. What do we got to do to draw a crowd? What do we have to do to get a crowd? Rick Warren, the pastor of the great Saddleback Church, mega church in California, writer of Purpose-Driven Church, Purpose-Driven Life, one of the statements he makes, I remember this from like 20 years ago in seminary, one of the statements he makes in his book is, in order to get a crowd, you have to first have a crowd. It's kind of weird logic, right? But people want to go where people are. People want to go where things are exciting, where there's lots of action, where there's lots of movement, where there's momentum. And when you don't have that, it's very hard to attract a crowd. So what do? Pastors, church leaders, they spend hours and resources and conferences and money trying to figure out, what do we got to do to get them in here? When really, that's good, but Jesus is probably more interested with, how do we get you out there? What do we got to do to attract the crowds? What do we got to give away? What do we have to change in order to draw the crowds? And notice, when they actually have a crowd, these guys are just at the point where they're like, send the crowd somewhere else. Just send them somewhere else. And I hope that we never adopt that kind of mentality. I get it. Sometimes you get tired. Sometimes you get exhausted. But I hope we don't ever get that attitude like, oh, you guys are having marriage problems? Oh, probably you should go to this other church. They're really good at that. Oh, you guys, want a great children's ministry? Oh, probably you should go to this other church. Oh, you guys are homeschoolers looking for, okay, probably you should go to somewhere else. You should probably go somewhere else. We can do that to the point where there's nobody left. Wouldn't it be great if some of us said, well, you know what? Maybe I could do something. Jesus looked at his disciples and what did he say? You give them something to eat. You help. You step in and you take some responsibility. What do you have? What can you give? How can you be a part of this solution? Don't just send them to the big Baptist church down the street. Don't just send them to the well-organized, well-structured church that has bus ministries and youth ministries, college ministries, single ministry, divorce care, celebrate recovery. You don't just send them to where it's already in place. You do something. You do something. And notice what the disciples say. They say, what? 10,000 people? There's 12 of us. And none of us have anything. We don't have any food to give them. And they answered, we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Unless we go and buy food for this crowd, what are we going to do? And John tells us, this moment is captured in all 4 of the Gospels. And John tells us that this was actually like a little boy that brought his lunch. It's very inspiring, this little kid's got 5 barley loaves. It's actually like the worst bread, the cheapest. It's not even the good stuff, He's got 5 barley loaves and 2 little fish, maybe think like little sardines or something, It's just enough to feed a kid. And it's almost like the disciples just find this kid and grab him and say, hey, he's got something. Would you share your lunch? The kid's like, yeah. They're like, here you go, Jesus, this is what we got. This is what we have. I'm sure that with 10,000 people, there's probably some mom in there that's got a pocketbook that's got granola bars or something in there, right? But it's almost like they have this kind of snarkiness. And I love the disciples. We are them. But I just see them so many times being snarky with Jesus and like, okay, all right, well, you want us to get something? All right, what do we got? Okay, this boy right here, okay. What does he got? Crackers and fish. That's what we got. What are we supposed to do with that? How far is this going to go among so many? Now what? Now what? Now what? This is what we have. We looked at our resources, and this is what we got. But how far will it go among so many? Now I want you to see something here. They've been with Jesus. They've seen him do things that nobody can do. They've seen him walk on water. They've seen him drive out demons. They've seen him heal the bleeding woman, raise Jairus' daughter from the dead. They've seen some incredible stuff. But notice how like their faith doesn't seem to get stronger. And that can be you and I. The Lord brings us through one catastrophe after another. He helps us with the finances. He protects our kids. He saves our marriage. He comes through for us. And then the next crisis hits and we're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? Why isn't God there for me? And it's like, don't you remember? Does anybody remember that God's been good to you? Does anybody remember what God has done for you, how he showed up at just the right time? And those lessons should go with us as we go forward in life. But the disciples, look at what they're focused on. They're focused on what they don't have. We don't have enough. We don't have the resources. We'd love to. We'd really love to. We'd love to reach this community, but come on. We're just a small little church. What do you really expect? We don't even have a full-time pastor. And we don't even have a drummer. We don't have a bass player. Well, we don't have a building. We don't have a bus. We don't have a youth pastor. We don't have a children's pastor. There's churches out there, they've got clown pastors. They got every pastor you can imagine. They got big budgets. They're killing it. Of course they're killing it. But what could God really ask of us? And it's so easy for us to focus on what we don't have and to focus on what is not available to us and to focus on how other people have advantages. What can we really do? What can God really expect of us? And that limiting vision will keep us from maybe going forward when God wants us to go forward. So what do? They find this little kid, they're like, oh, well, here you go, this is what we got. We got this. What can you do with that? And we have only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. He said to his disciples, have them sit down in groups of about 50 each. Now, I don't understand the whole purpose of this, but maybe we could just say it like this. There's some of you out here that appreciate this. If you don't know what to do, at least get organized. We may not be making any difference in the world, but at least we're tidy. At least we have structure. Our structure, it might not be accomplishing anything, but at least we have some kind of order, some kind of structure, and everybody's not bumping around. What are we doing? What are we doing? Where are we supposed to go? Get the people to sit down in groups of 50 and make it more manageable. Because 10,000 people is overwhelming, but now we have groups of 50. Now let's work with 50 and then 50 and then 50, because if we try to focus on the multitude, we're going to be overwhelmed. So get some structure, get some order, break it down, and make it a little bit more simple. I don't know that that's the lesson, but that seems like a good lesson out of that. And some of us, you guys think that way. Some of us, we're like spaghetti minds, we're just like monkeys darting around, jumping all over, trying to reach bananas, and then there's others of you guys who are much more structured. You think in like Google spreadsheets. And you're like, get some order, get some structure. If you don't know what to do, at least be organized. And we need that in the church. We certainly do. We need that kind of insight. I need that kind of insight. You can tell which one I am, the monkey brain, okay? All right, so he says, organize the people and have them sit down. Why? Because Jesus is going to fix it. He's going to fix it, and he wants to fix it in all things done in order. Okay? The Lord does it in order. All right. You may not understand the order, but God's got an order for it. So he says, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. Now, why didn't Jesus say, well, that's no good? Come on, guys. Surely there's some beef jerky out there. Look, I'm going to multiply this, and all we're going to have is crackers and fish. If you look a little harder, you might find somebody that's got something better, maybe roast beef sandwich. Whatever you give me, watch this, whatever you give me, I'll take, use, break, distribute, and multiply. So be sure you give me the right thing. What does Jesus do? He doesn't reject it because it's small. He doesn't reject it because it's insignificant. If you're willing to give it to the Lord, and you do this with a sincere heart, whatever it is, as small as it is, look at what he does. He takes it. Jesus took it. He didn't question it. He didn't rebuke them. Whatever you're willing to give, the Lord's willing to take and use. Think about the widow that has, the 2 little coins that doesn't even equal a penny, but it's all she has to live on, and she gives it to the Lord. And Jesus said she gave more than everybody else that gave today because she gave out of her poverty. And although it seems very small, And your gift may seem very small. Your contribution may seem very small. You say, I'm not a missionary in Africa. I'm not going across the world. I'm not changing lives and on radio broadcasts. Yeah, but do you have anybody in your world that you're influencing? Do you have a child? Do you have grandchildren? Do you have anybody in your life that you are sharing and giving yourself to? The Lord will take your gift, your contribution, and look at what he does. He takes it, and he looked up into heaven, gave thanks, broke it, and then he gave it to his disciples to distribute it. Notice that Jesus thanked the Lord. Maybe he thanked the boy. Thanked the Lord for what supply he had. The disciples were focused on what we don't have. Look at this. Jesus thanks God for what is not enough. Can we do that? Even though we don't have all the resources we might like, thank God that we have what we have. We get so focused on what we don't have, what others have, where we should be, what our expectations, how we've not measured up or how it doesn't measure up to our expectations, that we miss being present to what is actually available to us. What is available to them is all they need. Really, I mean, you can say it like this. Jesus is really all they need. The rest is just fish and chips. I mean, Jesus is all they really need, and he's all we really need. What changes people's lives ultimately is not me or the music. It's the Lord. The Lord changes lives, and the Lord is available to us, always free of charge. And so there's a lot of resources, lights, and all kinds of stuff we'd like to have, but we have everything we need. We have the power to change lives with us. We have the Spirit of God living in us that's lived in the church throughout history and is all over the globe and is being under different roofs all over the world right now. All they really need, they have. And notice how Jesus gives thanks for what is not enough, because he knows that with God, it will satisfy. It'll be enough. And so we take what we have. Look at the lesson for us as a church. We take who we are, we take what we have, we trust it to the Lord, and the Lord does what? Multiplies it and makes it effective to take care of the needs of the world around us. That's great. That's awesome. That is a sermon. I don't even have to work at this. It's just right there. I don't have to work at it. It's just God takes what we give him, but we got to give it to him. We got to give it to him willingly and say, Lord, here's my talent, here's my gift, here's my contribution. And then the Lord takes it, multiplies it. And notice this too, he breaks it. He breaks it. And maybe some of us need to be a little bit more broken. We got some edges on us the Lord wants to break off. He breaks it, multiplies it, and then gives it to his disciples. Now Jesus could have done it, right? He could have said, get out of my way, guys. You guys don't have any faith. You just move to the back. I'll take care of this. Give me the lunch. All right, guys, watch this miracle. And then he could be the one to distribute it to everybody, and the disciples could watch. Let's go do great things for the Lord. Well, mostly I will. You guys watch. Nobody gets excited about that. But notice, Jesus multiplies it, gives it to the disciples, and then says, you go out and distribute it. Have you ever had the opportunity to give away stuff to people that you didn't purchase? It's so much fun. It's probably more fun than when you buy it and give it to them, because you're always feeling like, I bought this and it costs a lot of money. But when like some organization donates all these resources and then you get to be the person on the front lines just handing it out, it's so much fun to be Santa Claus, to be giving stuff away to people meeting needs when there's more than enough. And the disciples, you see, it's not that they have to do this, they get to do this. And the Lord wants to use us in this great ministry. He doesn't have to. He could split the sky if he wanted to. Angels could come down and make God real to everybody, and they could just rock it out, and everybody would have to see him and then convert, and the Spirit could just make people convert. God could do it that way, but he doesn't do it that way. He distributes it to us and then says, you go out there and reach the crowds and give it away. And it's exciting. It's not have to, it's get to. So the disciples, they take I can't imagine how it's multiplying, but it's multiplying. Every time they reach in the bucket, there's more. And so then they just take their buckets out, their baskets out, and they just distribute to everybody, and they feed. Now they're all organized, so they feed everybody. They take care of all of it. And the Lord makes it enough. He satisfies, everybody eats till they're satisfied. Everybody's fed, everybody's taken care of. There's a lesson there for us, guys. We just go ahead and do what God wants us to do and trust the results to Him. Trust that He will meet the need. Trust that He will take care of all the... And that's hard for me as a pastor because I want to know how we're going to pay for it. Our leadership team wants to know how we're going to pay for it. We want to be able to see all the obstacles and the challenges ahead. But primarily, this is a faith ministry that we're doing here. And we can't always see the future. We can't always tell what's going to happen. We don't know what doors God's going to open or what He's going to close. So we just have to go out there and do what we can for the Lord, believing that God will multiply our efforts and meet the need around us. It's exciting stuff. And the disciples need to learn this lesson. Because think on the day of Pentecost. Coming up in the book of Acts chapter 2, when the Spirit falls on them, how are they going to reach the world? How are these 11, remember, one of them doesn't make it, they bring in Matthias, but how are these guys going to reach the world with the gospel? Except that God's going to have to multiply and multiply and multiply in order to meet the need. And He's still multiplying. Okay, so the disciples gave the bread away and the fish away, and everybody ate, and they were all satisfied. And then look at what happens. The disciples then had to go out and pick up all the leftovers. Why did Jesus make too much? He could have stopped, I'm sure He knows how much He needs, but notice He made enough that each of the disciples had to go with a basket and pick up leftovers because they didn't think there'd be enough. Isn't that awesome? Like when God does something, He does it more than enough. He is not only able, He's more than able. His mercies aren't just enough, they're more than enough. They're for you, and then for you tomorrow, and for you the next day, and then for everybody else. When He does something, it's more than enough. And then the disciples have to basically eat, you could say eat crow, but eat dirt. Because they were saying, we don't have enough, we don't have enough, we don't have enough. Now look at them. We got more than enough, we got more than enough, we got more than enough. And you just, I don't know, I imagine half of them are laughing and happy and the other half are a little bit grumpy. Because now they got to go pick up all these leftovers and they didn't think there'd be enough. It's just a great, great moment. Once when Jesus was praying in private, His disciples were with Him. He asked them, who do the crowds say I am? A lot of answers to that question, right? I mean, some people think, well, He's just a teacher, or He's a legend, or He's, just some wise rabbi that came along at one time, miracle worker, provider. There's a lot of answers that people could give to that question, and you're going to hear lots of debate and answers out there in the world. Go to a university class and ask them, who do you think Jesus is? And you probably just make them angry. But notice they say, well, some people think you're John the Baptist. John the Baptist had been killed because he was a bold preacher and people didn't like it. And so they cut his head off and killed him. Some people think John the Baptist has come back from the grave and it's you. Other people think it's Elijah from the Old Testament. Elijah is here with us. He's come back to us. So there's all kinds of wild theories about Jesus. There always has been. But notice what Jesus does. He looks at the disciples, and we know primarily He looks at Peter, and He says, but what about you? Who do you say I am? And that's where the whole God question that we could just debate and speculate about for hours. I realize some people love to. Some people never think about it, but other people, they love to debate and talk and think and have rhetoric and all kinds of discussions. But this is the really important question is, well, what are you going to do about it? Who is God for you? Who is the Lord for you? What does Jesus mean to you? I get there's all these thoughts and ideas, but what about you personally? Remember I said before that we as evangelical Christians, we have a personal faith, a relationship with God. And notice that at some point in all of this church business, it's going to come down to you figuring out what you're going to do with Jesus. It's great for Mom. to know what she wants to do with the Lord. It's great for Dad, Grandpa, and all those people that brought you into this. But at some point on some bench somewhere in some camp or at some Sawdust Trail revival or somewhere, it's going to come down to, what are you going to do with the Lord? What's he mean to you? And notice the answer of the disciples is, you're the Messiah. Or in the older translations, you guys remember, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. That good confession that we repeat before somebody's baptized. Who do you say the Lord is? I believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Christ, Messiah, same word, just different languages. You're the one that's been anointed by God. You are who you say you are. You're the one who is to come to take the punishment and penalty for sins. And then Jesus, look at verse 22. Jesus said, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and he must be killed and on the third day raised to life. Now, I want you to see that Jesus is as clear as he could ever be about what's coming next. And 3 different times, Jesus will say it exactly like this. Very clear, so the disciples have no questions. Now, to be fair, the disciples, I don't think, understand what he's talking about. This is one of those lessons that will make sense to them after the fact. But it doesn't make sense to them right now. It's one of those things that you hear in passing and you say, I don't know what he's talking about. Do you know what he means by this? Because think, for one thing, they thought, if he's the Son of God, if he really is the Messiah, he's not going to die. He's going to reign on a throne. He's going to be the new King David. And when you come into your kingdom, Lord, let me sit on your left and let my brother sit on your right. See, that was their expectation, is Jesus is a conquering king, a political leader who is going to drive Rome away, clean up all the established religion, and finally make things right again. And they're very caught up in this perspective. But what is Jesus pointing at? Actually, I'm come to die, sacrifice my life, be crucified, killed on a cross, but that won't be the end. You're going to think it's the end, but that won't be the end. I'm actually going to be raised to life. Now, you see how clear he is? He literally says exactly what's going to happen, but I don't know that the disciples, it really connects, because he says it again and again to them. And when you get to the moment that this actually happens, and Jesus did rise from the dead, they had a hard time believing it, even though he told them that's exactly what's going to happen, because sometimes lessons don't make sense until after it's over. Then he said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up your cross. Not only do I have a cross, but there's a cross for each of you guys as well. Now, think, these guys, again, in their mind, we're headed up. We're headed up. We're going to ascend. We are moving toward greatness. We are following a miracle worker. We are following a powerful teacher. We are following somebody who can cast out demons and turn water into wine. We are on our way up. But what Jesus is saying is we're actually on our way down. That we are headed toward greatness, but it is a descent into greatness. We're moving down. And not only will I face a cross, but every one of you guys has a cross to bear also. Oh yes, preacher, I know exactly what you're talking about. My bursitis is my cross to bear. You just can't even imagine what it's like for me. That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about your blood pressure, your hypertension. He's not talking about your goiter, your whatever's on your foot that's growing that shouldn't be there. He's not talking about your marriage. He's not talking about your wife. That's not your cross to bear. I mean, it may be a cross to bear, but that's not what he has in mind. What he means is you're going to try to live for me in this world. People are going to reject you. What are they going to do to me? They're going to reject me. I'm going to be crucified. I'm going to be hated. I'm going to be scorned. If you're going to follow me, that's what's going to happen to you, and that is your cross to bear. And if you're not ready to carry that cross, you're not ready to follow me. And I love this wide open door the church has where anybody can come and anybody is loved and everybody is welcome. But I want you to see that it is a funnel, and at the bottom of that funnel, it is very narrow. And everybody's loved and everybody's welcome, but watch this. Eventually you're going to hit Jesus, and Jesus is going to say, who do you say I am? And then he's going to say, great. Are you ready to count the cost to be my disciple? You can't just accept me as your Savior. I am the Lord, and you must follow me as Lord. And the world might hate you. Are you ready to carry that cross? Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Oh, you want to protect yourself? You want to insulate yourself from being hated by the world? If you try to save and protect yourself, you'll eventually lose everything. But whoever loses their life for me will truly save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and lose or forfeit their very self or their soul? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet lose his soul? So you see what he's doing here? He's saying, where's your perspective? Is it on your safety right now? Your comfort right now? Protecting yourself right now? Because you will. You might protect yourself right now. But what about eternity? What about eternity, sir? You have a soul. And what will become of this soul for eternity? If you give it all away right now and surrender to the Lord right now, it will seem dangerous. It will seem risky. It will seem like you are making yourself vulnerable. But what will you gain in exchange for your soul? Whoever is ashamed of me and my words, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them. Why would they be ashamed? Because the Son of God is supposed to live, not die. You would follow a crucified Lord? The crowds mocked him and ridiculed him and spit on him. They hated him. That's your master? That's your king? That's your choice? If you're ashamed of him, he says, I'll be ashamed of you. But if you acknowledge me before all men, what does he say? I will acknowledge you before my Father in heaven. So you see, guys, ultimately it boils down to this. Ultimately it boils down to, we're pretty much in a giant waiting room. And there's two doors. One door leads to life, the other door leads to death. And at times in our life, we move toward the door to life. That other times it seems like we move back to the door that leads to death. But realize this, in just a moment, the nurse is going to open the door. The angels will open the door and they will step out into this waiting room and they will call your name. Let's go. Your time of waiting is up. And so why would you get so engrossed in the magazines? Why would you get so engrossed in Dr. Phil on the TV? Why would you get so engrossed in the kid doing his homework? Or the goldfish in the fish tank? Why would you get so comfortable and so warm drinking your coffee in the waiting room that you start to think that you're here for the waiting room? The physician is calling. His messenger is at the door. The remedy is here. And so ultimately you got to decide, which door am I going to be standing at? The door to life or the door to death? You get to make this choice. You get to make this decision. We want to help you with that decision. We're here to walk with you in this journey. That's what a church is. I mean, basically we're just like the Old Testament people walking through the wilderness trying to get to the promised land. When your shoes wear out, you can borrow mine. When you don't have enough, you can eat what I have. Our goal is to help us all get there. So we're here to help you in any way we can. If you're ready to commit yourself to the Lord, to know Him as your Savior, to be baptized into Christ, we'd love to help you with that decision, to rededicate yourself to the Lord and say, man, I have walked far away from God, and does God really still love me? Can He really still forgive me? Look, it's His favorite thing to do. That's why Christ came. His grace is sufficient for you, not just for me or the band or the leadership team, or His grace is sufficient for you. Will you acknowledge Him before men? Are you ready today to say, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God? You ready for that? What that means for your life, your future? God, we thank you, Lord, for your goodness and grace. We thank you for your love and mercy. Thank you for bringing us here today to worship you. Thank you for your word that challenges us. Help us to remember that you are more than enough. When we lack the resources, we lack the sufficiency, help us to just trust that you're going to take what we have and multiply it, and it will be fine. You will take care of it. Help us not trust in those resources, but to trust in you. If there's anybody here today that doesn't know you as Savior, just press in on their hearts today. When that lunch was given, the Lord took it, looked up to heaven, thanked God, and then what did he do? He broke it. And right now, today, maybe God is breaking something in you. It's not pleasant, it's not comfortable, but it needs to happen. The way forward is the way of brokenness. And it's through our brokenness, it's through the wound that God heals the world. And it's through your brokenness that you're made strong. I know it's hard to understand, but it's through your brokenness that you're made strong. God's got to tear some stuff down before he can build. When God sent Jeremiah out to be a prophet, he said, I establish you as a prophet to break down